Now, as a Nai, that means I do have V in my conscious fourth, my polar power, but I do have it there. And so, for me, you will see a distinct signal of amped occasionally. It's layered underneath my distinct signals of unflappable, caring, and frustrated. But it is there and will peak out from time to time. So perhaps you'll see it in some of the filmings, maybe in this one. Let's see. Well, V is concerned with the concept of reality. Now, the thing to note about amped, that word, what does it mean? Well, there's lots of interpretations of that word because it comes to different fields of study, and also there is popular and colloquial uses of it. So the way we use it here is to mean both energized and suddenly so. And that's one thing that V has as a power. It's the fastest if you're going to talk about speed at which it does things. As far as real time, you can get in whether you're talking about Ni and V over what happens first, sixth sense or five senses. But as far as concrete things go, V is the fastest, with Nai being the slowest. For this reason, it gets done doing its revolution. It's a full revolution of a V process is an incredibly fast, tight revolution. For this reason, V as a sibling kind of has an overall demeanor of, I'm ready, can I have another one? Meaning, can I have another Twinkie? Can I have another go at the football game? Can I have another go at walking in the park? Whatever, but it's ready to go again. So of all the powers, V is the sibling that is ready to go again. It's always ready to go. And so for that reason, it seems energized and quickly energized. Now, all the powers use energy, spend energy, manipulate energy in different ways, but V has a few things that set it apart. First of all is that in the reciprocal relationship between a pod power and the pings of social alchemy of the environment, V is satisfied on the most consistent basis. So as far as being ready to go again, V doesn't really have much downtime. It has the least downtime of any of the powers because, like right now, the lighting, the way that you're dressed, the light of a computer screen behind you, the sounds of the street outside, all those things tickle my V. They're interesting because they're sensory phenomenon. They're sensory phenomenon that has risen above the general sensory phenomenon, and that is just interesting. Sensory phenomenon is innately interesting, and as I mentioned in the filmings, that may sound unusual to state it so straightforward like that, but it's important to note that the rest of the psyche is not really concerned with the five senses, with sounds and heat and different things like that, wind in your face, but V is. And it's important to note that there's a reason why you don't spend all your time focusing on that, because if you did, you would be perpetually in that process, because there's no breaking point or no pause point with V's process. Even Ni, there will become pauses between abstraction opportunities. In environment, there'll be some lesser or greater amount. Does that make sense? But with V, pretty much any sensory experience is a loop, a cycle, a full process turn for them. Heroically, they have done it. So I guess those are three things really about being amped. One is eager to do it, have energy to do it, are ready to do it again quickly after having just done doing it. So in all three parts of this process, V is ready to go. It's ready to go beforehand, it's ready to go while it's doing it, and it's ready to go right after. And that's because when V is being used, even for myself, it's my polar power, but there's an immediacy to it. For me, the reason why it's my polar power and therefore I can't use it in an unlimited way is that it will distract from my other processes, and that is the issue. But V itself does not particularly have an issue as far as being fed. It is, in my case, the feeding of my V, I have to be careful about how much that modulates my Nai. But it's separating the power of itself. I don't have a problem with V. In fact, you can see me late at night getting various sweets. V can be easily satisfied. You take a walk, you turn the TV on, you listen to music, you eat something, and so it gets that satisfaction. The question, obviously, is to get the most quality, and we'll talk with Power Flows how V can be very good at finding the best, the most exquisite sensory experiences that you can have, and taking the most possible sensory experience out of the same environment. It is like Ni that way, where Ni can abstract. V doesn't abstract, but it does soak. It can like soak like a sponge more out of the environment if it thinks to do that. There can be very masterful uses of V where it is pulling out very sophisticated draughts, how they say that, from the environment. So you basically can, V like Ni can pretty much, if it knows what it's doing, and V is easier than Ni this way, put a tap in the environment and just tap in. Out comes nice syrupy goodness. So the objective perception powers, both of them, tend to have a very upbeat attitude towards life. Ni has more of a buoyant nature because what's doing it is abstract, intangible. But with V, you usually can see why the person who has a V is reacting the way they are. For example, Crystal Light. I like that, it made me happy. It's something the environment gave to me, the tasty Crystal Light, and my V likes it. And it likes it for what it is. Cool, refreshing, lemony goodness. And my dad is very fond of doing. That's why Niji can make very good salespeople if they decide to go that route, but you have to really like the product. But if I like a product for some reason, I'm very eccentric, so I would never do this, but if I did, it's easy to point out why it is great, because the pleasure that V takes in doing something, it's like a child. It's like child who just learned about like mud. I mean, it's that kind of pleasure. So like, V has a very upbeat attitude. That's where the amped comes in, because basically the world is one big playground. And even when the V becomes more intense, the other powers will discern what that means. Some of the perceptions may contextualize what that means. But as far as V is concerned, it's just more info. So there is a joy at information coming in from the environment that is just intense, unusual, different, pleasingly textured. So even, for example, the physical activity of working out, that can be a very fun sensation. V can have a very, V is the palette of physical sensation. So the entire gamut of what humans can find pleasurable in sensory experience, V can do that. So for that reason, V is the constant feeder. Of the gathering powers, it's the one that's always going to get its fruit. So it's pretty hard to keep V down, which is really kind of one of its great attributes. Is it has an earthy quality, a kinetic quality, a part of life as it is unfolding. Sort of sensory phenomenon is unfolding, and I'm part of the sensory phenomenon. And that's why it is right brain. It's a right brain perception, because it goes with it. It can use other powers, obviously, to steer it, for example, Jai or Zai. But itself, V, is just noting things. It's just noting the taste of food. Drinking it in more. Because sometimes to tell whether or not you like something, you just have to drink it in more. So V as an attitude is similar to Ni this way, which is it'll just drink in more. That's always the answer. If you don't have what you need right now, go find the thing that will feed you. It's probably really close by. Probably, like the kids when they gnaw on everything? That's almost like V in a sort of metaphorical way. Anything could pick it up. You could go outside and see the sun, that just picks V up. V likes the feeling of that, seeing that sensory phenomenon. It's unusual. This gets later on to things like aesthetic experience, so forth. Is V basically sees life as a work of art in an aesthetic kind of way. So every act is a pleasing, heroic act. Now, usually when you're using V, you don't even think of it this way, because V's not into big thoughts. It's usually into thoughts that are following something it's feeding. But the pleasure it takes in that transforms the experience of it into an artistic experience. So as far as finding that peak, V has the most straight route. And so really its main job is to be enthusiastic and go, 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 go get it. And that's what it does. It's amped. It's ready to go. It knows its food is right out there and it wants to go get it. Next, there's another thing that goes with the amp is the suddenness. The suddenness in going for it, but also the suddenness of it being gone. It has a very fast rate. It's the fastest rate of processing, again, of all the pod powers. It cycles. So it gets hungry again very quickly. If you had a wind in your face, it feels good, cool. But then when the wind is not blowing in your face a moment later, then I need more food. So it's amped because food is all around, but it's also amped in that it must always be like looking around for the food because it gets hungry quick. That's the price it pays. So it feeds constantly, but it has to. So there is a very kinetic kind of quality to it. And it can even go into a frenetic quality if it can't get what it needs. But usually V does get what it needs because it's so plentiful. The 5 senses, sensory stimulation. It's important to note that V is an objective perception power, but does not have to always be used in an extroverted or outward sense. For example, for myself, I often remember things. My memory is terrible, but when I do remember things, it tends to be more in a V way instead of Vi. So it's more of a reliving, being there again. So V can be used within the mind, separate from actually happening sensory phenomenon. It can be imagined sensory phenomenon, and it can also be remembered sensory phenomenon. So again, for that reason, it's easily fed, because if you've ever tried to remember something, it's often easy to try to remember some kind of sensory cue. It takes you there. So as far as a token that you can pick up, both externally and in the psyche, V is turned on easily. It's easily stimulated. So it's important to note, like, oh, you have 5 senses, sensory stimulation. Yes, but that means it is the most easily stimulated of all the pod powers. So V is rarely going to be in a state other than pleasantly or unpleasantly agitated, stirred up. Next, by what? Environmental scanning, alertness. This is another thing that's going to bring the amped kind of quality, which is myself, I have V, and when I am engaging an environment that has sensory phenomenon that's moving quickly, my left brain can't move that fast, so I must go to the right for those kind of perceptions, and for me that is V. So if I'm in a room and there's a lot of people running around, and I have to make sure that I don't bump into someone or they bump into me, I have to use my V vision, my laser eyes. But doing so automatically kind of gears my body up physically. And this again later on we'll talk about some of the kinetic energy and other things that V has, but it starts right here, is that it's a perception power, so it's not making a judgment of what it's going to do, but it may have to. So when V is bringing information similar to me this way, you're not doing anything with it yet, but you are aware that lots of important information is coming in, it's coming in fast. This just, for both the objective perception powers, this just, it gets the system really up and ready. So both Ni and V are very, very action ready. V tends to be in a more physical way, Ni more in a mental way, but both of them are very ready to go based on the kind of perception they have. Their perceptions are in real time, so in V's case, it's looking around as the 5 sense phenomenons are happening. Balls are being thrown by, people are walking, kids are crying, whatever's happening, and it may be relevant. And so V's thing is, it just tries to suck in as much information as it can until it knows what it has to do with it, or until it fills up. When that happens, the very act of drinking it in, I mentioned this in the filming, as I drink it in, my eyes will widen, then the rising the eyebrows, then a lifting of the carriage. Both Ni and V will have this. But Ni, if you remember, has the dancing eyes. So when they have that lift, it's more of a buoyant, kind of dreamy, syncopated lift. But V, when it lifts like I'm doing now, it's different. It's a body lift. It's very kinetic, It's almost like I'm not saying it is, but it feels for me like it's connected very closely to the central nervous system. Because when I notice a ball moving towards me, or a car moving, or the light turning, that I have to walk, whatever, like my body's just ready. I haven't made discernments yet what I'm going to be doing, but I guess evolution is kind of this way. When things come at you fast, the objective perceptions just drink that in, and then the body or mind, whatever, just gets geared up and ready to do something with that fast moving information. But V just drinks it in and gets ready. In fact, the more going on in the environment, the more ready the body gets. It can actually be a bit draining even for V to not act. To actually have all that kind of sensory phenomenon and not to touch it, not to engage in it in some way. So that's why it's amped. Just be talking about that, it makes you want to move, makes me want to do it. For example, everyone has this phenomenon, but those who have V, it tends to be more noticeable, which is when watching movies or sports or things like that, actually having their body kind of start moving when they are imagining the film. As the actions happen to the characters on screen, sometimes their bodies kind of like, tense up. Everyone does that somewhat, but I've noticed V users tend to be more pronounced in that. The taking of perceptions has like an almost immediate reaction in the body, but not a discernment, a readiness, just almost like electric energy, electric battery energy. So it's as perceptions come in, the faster they come in, the richer the sensory impressions come in, then there is like a lift in the body of kinetic, ready energy, action energy. I would say probably some adrenaline in there as well that is very closely related with V. In fact, because V, I think, can often be very close to things such as fight or flight. Even so much as a berry. You taste the berry and it tastes bitter or not. That's actually V's very early warning signal of what to do with the energy it has, its heightened senses. Because V can do that. It can take its tongue towards a berry, and as you do, the tongue will begin to tingle. An extra field of energy, of electricity around the tongue's buds will become more charged as the V is preparing to do a tongue drinking in of sensory information. The same thing if a V user, I'm looking at that label, and if I keep looking at it, my eyes will begin to gear more towards that, including my face slackening, including my body getting tense. It's hard to explain, but these things happen as an anticipatory, similar to what I guess the way you'd say like hunting animals. When they start seeing the movement, things are happening in their body automatically. It's almost like those movements, they prepare them for fast time, like bullet time. V is very much concerned with bullet time, but not just bullet time. I would say altered time. Even though it's real time, it can accentuate it, it can slow it down, and it can speed it up. So, for example, like tasting the strawberries, there can be a slowing down of the tasting experience so that more can be taken from it, more can be imbibed. It's the same strawberry, it's the same calories, but it can even take the same 3 seconds to chew it and swallow it. But if focusing on V while doing it, I can't explain other than this, that then a lot more layers of information, like a JPEG being saved. If V is focusing on what it's tasting, on what it's smelling, it will drink in a much more massive file as far as how much sensory information is included in that. That can be just from anything like looking at a photograph. So the act of doing it though charges it up, because all of the powers to some degree, even Z, which is very represented in normal life, there are breaks when Z is doing what it does and the payoff comes at some point because the Z dynamics was successful. There is some lulls in there, but not with V. Generally, the doing of it is the feeding. The only power that's anywhere close to that would be Ni, where the actual doing of it actually feeds it while it's doing it. The environment actually provides the food. In the moment, present. That's actually kind of what I was saying right there, is that when you go to taste a strawberry with V, there can be a strawberry coming in and whoa, 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 oh. And it sounds funny, but there's a very childlike quality that happens to it. People are like, man, that person's enjoying that strawberry. And that's why there's a heightened enjoyment from almost anything sensory. which again gives that ant feeling because did you eat pizza? Yes. Did you eat it with V? It's kind of like that. It's like anything you could have done, I did it, but I was using V when I did it. I was drinking it a lot more. And that just kind of highlights, it's kind of flowing naturally now, which is visceral experience. Anytime that you drink it in, it's getting to what I call visceral experience, which is, it's sensory, so it's still V, but you're seeing how it is a pod power. V is not actually 5 senses, it's the concept of the 5 senses. So there can be a lesser or greater taking of that in. Does that make sense? It's not a given quantity. That's important to note. Concrete reality is not a given quantity. V is your ability to drink in concrete reality, of which there's an infinite amount, so you can only bring in a certain portion of it. So with V, particularly if it's conscious for you, there's the ability to drink in greater moments, recognizing them as V peak moments, that, oh, this is a really good strawberry, or, ooh, this is a really great sunset. And allowing that to kind of like really sear into your psyche and taking that in a good way, that it kind of embeds extra meaning. And even though it is just sensory experience, once you go into visceral, it's already starting to gather extra meaning. For example, I touch a rock and it's hot. I'm on the beach. I can leave my hand there for a second and like release into the V. And when that happens, it'll be like, warm stone. I will remember that sensation more if I do that. Even as V can do that. If we decide to release and drink that in, that will be a much richer file in the data banks, and it will have more meaning and it'll have more resonance, and we can recall it easier. It's important to me because my memory sucks. So that's something that allows V to remember itself. Also, it's a way of drinking in healthy things and leaving out toxic things. V can decide, and it's not discernment, it's simply an appetite, kind of like abstractions. It can layer over something and decide that as it's drinking that it's only a shallow drink. In which case it does that, just moves right on. And then when it goes to something else and it's able to drink in it more, it will keep drinking until it feels satisfied. So one thing you'll see with V here is, unlike all the other powers, even Ni, which is very fast, but you do have to abstract and to coalesce some spirit forms. So there is a nothing and then something. All the pod powers have that to some degree, but V is the one that doesn't have that or has it in the least, which is if you're eating a bunch of grapes and you eat 3 grapes and then the lion interrupts you and you run off, well, you still have 3 grapes. V is the only power that every single sensory beat, once you have it, you have it. That's what's so cool. It's like, ooh, yay, that's mine. Okay, yay, that's mine. So it basically keeps opening these sensory presents, and then it has it. It can never be taken away from it again. That experience can never be taken away. So there's a yay, that's mine. So in a way, V lets every human be their own king, because if you're eating something and it makes you feel like you're eating the cake that kings eat or queens eat, then you are. And that gets into the next thing, which is sensual experience, also aesthetic experience. We'll start with sensual experience. Is humans, we'll take for example Jai. Bless you. The sense of well-being. The sense of well-being has a lot to do with the objective perception that's attached to it. So both the Christinas, they have Ni attached to their Jai, but it could also be V. So either way, there is the ability to adjust what food you're giving to the subjective discernment. Does that make sense? So in V's case, what it can do, it can take a strawberry and it can savor that, recognize it as a special experience. This is something that the powers have. All the pod powers have that component, concrete, tacit, artistic, spiritual spectrum, all of them. So obviously V has the concrete, but know that it also has the spiritual, has a full spectrum. Just like Nai has a concrete aspect, although the more spiritual artistic side is more obvious. But in this case, you're seeing visceral to sensual to aesthetic. That's basically tacit, artistic and spiritual in a way right there, as the V power can drink in something that's more exceptional. This makes it feel more rewarded. It's almost like Super Mario Brothers, and you actually hit one token and get 100 tokens out of it. If you know that that can be done, if you have a sensory experience and you recognize it as special, that's important. The ability to recognize this is 1,000 thread cotton. If your V can not discern, because not discernment, if its palate is nuanced enough to note that it's having that experience, it enjoys it that extra much. It was already going to enjoy it because, hey, it was sheets, right? Hey, sheets! Okay, and then, wow, these are cozy sheets. Okay, that's visceral. Then they're like, this is like, oh, I don't know if I've ever had cozy like this. Oh, give me time. See, right there, I'm happy. This is happiness because of recognizing that I've never touched anything like this. Right there, I'm a king, or I am a special person. Anyone with V has that as they touch an object and they get to have a special experience. And really, the only thing that you need to do that for many things is the ability to appreciate a moment. Hence, in the moment present. A lot of people actually may have the finest chocolate, but they didn't have the finest chocolate. That sounds simple, but it's not. My dad taught me this. It's a really good lesson. You can have the finest chocolate and not have the finest chocolate. Vice versa, you could have like some good chocolate from Belgium. It's the best chocolate ever because you actually allowed the V to go into the sensual experience of it and let it carry you. Allowed you to take similar. It's not the same thing, but similar to knee abstractions. V can take more sensory, raising that sensory to a higher level, so that you can get all the layers. But to do that, and this is why both Nia and V are seen as very open, they're the most open of the powers. You have to open yourself to the experience. But if you do, there are layers and layers and layers to the sensual experience until you just can't take anymore. There's always more to it. For example, a way of explaining this in a reactive way, but it's actually a proactive power, is if you go on a fast, for example, and you don't eat for a few days, or you have juice for many days or a couple weeks or whatever, then your taste buds will be heightened. That's happening sort of to you, but it's actually not like an environmental phenomenon. That's actually something you as a human can do, which is to focus on the base natural law. It sounds funny, but there's a natural law to tasting. As we've been inundated in our society with all kinds of things that throw our taste buds off, our senses off, the foods we eat and so on, that dulls it. But V is actually not just the ability to do the five senses. It is a spirit form. It is a concept of reality. It knows that there are healthy things for you. So V, both in visual, sound, and eating, is attuned over all these vast times of evolution to note sensory things that are good for us, to go after them. So it does have a great power to note that if you release into the native scenting ability that it has to find the goodies, which are more than just goodies in the environment. V actually has, like I said, a concept of what would be bountiful, of what would be pleasing. So you can find it even if it's not in the environment. Aesthetic experience. This is something I'm very fond of getting to myself, is the idea that a sensory experience can be a way to reach a heightened, good, altered state. So if you have any kind of ritual for, say, a birthday or some kind of special event, some kind of promotion or whatever, oftentimes there are certain sensory things that go along with that, certain visual things, foods that are given, music that is played, because it creates a special moment. And this is where we're getting into the more spiritual aspect of V. There is a spirit form motif from having the best chocolate ever. This is key. It's not necessarily abstraction of that. It literally is the experience of having the best chocolate ever. And if you note it, it's kind of like abstraction this way. If you note that there is triangleness in the triangle, okay, but you do have to release into it to let it start happening. Same thing. Oh, this is good chocolate. Yes, I noted it, but I have to stay on it. I have to stay noting it the entire time I have the chocolate, where I won't get the full thing. From beginning to end, just like we need to get the full abstraction, to get the full taste, the full drink, V must be, it's like eating. You can't, it's kind of like you're eating like around a table with a bunch of like, you know, greedy siblings. If you don't pay attention to the eating, you won't eat. But the upside is, eating's easy. All you have to do is grab, put in your mouth, and there you go. So V is like that. It must feed constantly. It must be vigilant of where its next meal is coming from. But luckily, it's right there. So it has a very up nature, very up, very ready, and then, pleased, and moving on next. But the aesthetic experience I want to highlight so you don't think it just has that childlike primitive angle, because it doesn't. It can drink in things like art, like a sunset, where it's not physically feeding you, but sunsets do feed V. Like the power of it, the composition of it, seeing pictures from the Hubble telescope is just like, whoa. The V recognizes that in the concept of reality, it's seeing a special reality. So from visceral to central to aesthetic, V recognizes that all these sensory experiences we're having are not the same, and you're trying to get the best ones, and you'll actually live a special life. You'll have special experiences. You'll have walked special roads. And that is part of being a hero. Heroes actually eat special foods. They see special creatures. They visit special lands. And so V wants that. He wants to collect those experiences. He wants to have those experiences. See, I'm amped. I want experiences. I want to go get them. Okay, next. Stage presence, animal magnetism. Because V is on the move, that's one of the things that gives it the animal magnetism, because anytime something is moving with sureness, that has a sort of animal magnetism as you watch a cheetah do what it does, as you watch chipmunks do what they do. It can be anything, but whenever you watch a creature doing what it does, there's like just an animal poetry to it. All of the pod powers, particularly because they can be influenced with memes in a lot of ways, it throws it off to where you are being stilted in some way. It's not bad, but there is that impingement of the more, what you would think of as non-primitive thoughts, such as Z, schedules, G, culture. In V, that's why it's very important I mentioned the aesthetic thing, because V is not primitive. However, it does actually have that kind of beauty to it in that way. So I use this in a positive sense, in that when V, like someone who has V is doing sports, whatever, and they're going after a ball or something else, they're like a cheetah going after the prey. There's no second guessing in V. Of all the powers, V second guesses itself not at all. Because what's there to second guess? If a bloodhound's on the trail, it's on the trail. And the only thing you second guess is if you don't have the trail anymore, but that's not even second guessing. Either you have a grape or you don't. So that's the only thing to do, is to grab it. To just grab it and make it yours. And so that has a very true primitive quality, like a child who teases on everything and thinks, can I eat that? Can I eat that? What's there for me to eat? However, in a more sophisticated way, even when someone's a fully grown adult, when they go to do something that is what you consider to be a normal V activity, such as maneuvering around stairs or something that you've done many times before, eating something that you've done before, or doing something that is easy within your physical capabilities of doing, or is within your physical purview. Okay, the thing is with V though, the more powerful that's represented in your psyche, the larger that range goes. Where V is seen as being maybe in a larger room. Because, for example, when you get amped, distances seem smaller. That's important to note. When V sees something over there, it instantly gets energy to go walk over there and check out what it is. Is that a banana? Can I eat it? What is it? What's going on over here? It's innately interesting, and that gives a power to do it. That's the thing that actually relates to peaking, is the other 7 powers have more difficulty in varying degrees in peaking. Where V, of all the powers in modern times, is still able to peak in its sort of original primitive fashion more easily than the other 7 powers are. Which is why it has sort of, it's pumped up, because it can still do what it was built to do more than the other 7 powers can sometimes. Fun-loving, zest for life. As mentioned, there is the fact that, ooh, I saw something over there. Is that something I can do something with? What is that? Is it fun? Is it cool? Is it dangerous? Is it safe? What is that? Ooh, I want to go see it. that interest, similar to Ni with change initiation, but this is a different, more physical way. But that alertness, that raising of the kinetic energy, that has an effect on people around. They also feel an urge to move because of that agitation of the body energy that V has. When V gets antsy, it makes other people antsy around it because it just makes up this kinetic field of, I should move. That relates to also walking over to it. When walking over, V is going to be fueled by the walk. Again, that's unusual. It's the only power that really gets that. It pretty much has larger and lesser feeding points, but that's all there really is. Everything is technically a feeding point, even walking over to a particular feeding point. So there's not usually a down period. That gives, it's similar to buoyant, but buoyant tends to have with Ni a more of a mental or spiritual or emotional kind of quality to it, whereas the V, it's actually a physical quality. For example, if you are in an event and you have friends with you and you are doing some kind of physical thing, maybe you're lifting up some boxes or something like that, and there's now something else happening. Another box comes up, another shipment of boxes. It's a psychological phenomenon. If you feel kinetic energy resonating from your friends, unconsciously there is a feeling with you that it's doable. Similar to Ni buoyancy with mental stuff, there is resonating off of the person who's amped energy, kinetic physical energy, that they can still go. They're not tired. They still got, so that lifts the energy of those around you, because if they were thinking of maybe we should stop, maybe we don't have any more energy, the amped energy of others who have it will raise you thinking, no, we still have energy, we still can go. So amped, and that gets down here, which is kinetic energy galvanized. Like Ni buoyancy, when V gets going, it can charge up those around them so they want to move, so they realize they can move. A lot of times there's, like Ni, there's locked kinetic energy or conceptual energy, and if people would reach for it, they could get it. V naturally knows it's there, but it can awaken that in other people, that if they were to exert some energy right now, they could actually feed, that the environment is really theirs for the taking. The other powers can forget that in certain ways. V never forgets that, which relates to concrete existence. Since its muscle flexes on a constant basis, it's always getting that energy loop coming back, which means it's pretty much always up or always getting back up. So that has a life force to it, like a physical vigor, almost like a central nervous system vigor of, I can take more, I can drink more in, life is not coming at me too fast. So that has positive and negative signal flavors depending on the level of development of the V user, and also the powers that the other people who are around the V user actually are at. Because like all the powers, the signal itself innately is not bad. It just simply is the function it's supposed to be doing. So all the 8 powers, their signals are good if they are well developed. So, well developed, what does V have? Well, amped also gives off these sort of sub-signals of stylish, earthy, and inquisitive. Okay, so stylish means that being aware of sensory things, there's an awareness of what objects are more pleasing than others, what activities are more pleasing than others, what ways of doing those activities are more sensorily pleasing. For example, if someone actually does an activity like dancing or walking or anything like that in a way that is pleasing to their body, it very often is very pleasing to other people. It's just that way, it works that way. You know, the old term being comfortable in your skin. V has that. It has a style to it because it's come from the fact, so to speak, that it's a primate, and it's a very sophisticated primate, and it's happy in its place. It doesn't second guess that. And so there's a style in that. There's a carefree style. There's an earthiness, which comes again from enjoying the earthy pleasures, from enjoying things like food, sex, weather, things that are out there. You could think of as just normal life, but they're not. They are high points in life, if you actually ritualize them, if you actually choose to really drink it in. Because you understand that your perception corridor is like a valve that can be opened or closed. So if V is opened up, it can receive more, and if it closes it, it receives less. And that's up to you if you want to do that. But there is a greater vista to be experienced right in any environment you are in than most people give credit for. And if you use the V, it'll see that, and instantly, bam, it's amped. It has energy. There's a battery for it. There's something very interesting and important for it to take part in, to be a heroic interactor with. Acquisitive, it likes to get stuff, because sensory things are fun to enjoy, they're fun to collect, they're fun to take, they're fun to play with. So there's a childlike quality that rubs off on people, kind of the energy children have, that boundless energy. You're like, because if you look at the caloric way of doing it, doesn't make any sense, because people still have to have, you know, food, and they have to do things. Like babies and children, they can just run and run and run. You're like, how are they doing that? It has a lot to do with the fact that they are allowing the environment to stimulate them in a more raw, full influx kind of way, and it feeds the psyche. So most humans actually, it's not the food they're eating or other things like that. I mean, obviously you do have to take this into account, but it's much more the mental state, much more the psychological state, the stress state, the ability to peak. It has to do with how much energy you have. So V, as a power, psychologically, is fed often. So remember that, even though it pays attention to the physical five senses, it is an actual psyche power, and it is being psychically fed a lot. Okay. For example, if you eat an apple, this is true. If you eat an apple and you go, cool, I ate an apple, and you eat an apple and go, apple, I had an apple today, you can go farther. Now that doesn't make sense mathematically because they both gave you the same amount of calories, but it does matter. If you enjoy the apple more, it got to you more, your psyche feels more fed. If your psyche feels more fed, you walk farther. It's true. You'll be the one that makes it out of the desert and doesn't die if you actually think you can make it, if you actually have energy to keep going. And a lot of it has to do with what you think the environment is. Now obviously when you eat food, there is the calorie aspect, but the way your psyche interprets what you are experiencing, and that can go back to the visceral, sensual, or aesthetic, determines how much it feeds you and in what way. So V has a great control over exactly how it feeds, like abstractions. They're not abstractions because they are sensory, but there is an ability to choose if you're going to drink more out or not. And that's a really awesome power, and it pretty much is, well, I won't do it right now. Just talk about this, make me go downstairs and just raid the icebox. So I can barely stay in the seat. Anyway, the bad sides. Amped can strike some people or some mojos, particularly if you're not well developed with it, as shallow, primitive, and gluttonous. Why is that? Well, the gluttonous is because, as mentioned, amped is easily fed, but also gets hungry quick. So if you don't do the higher levels of V, where you drink in the visceral experience, the sensual experience, the aesthetic experience, then there'll be a lot more of just eating Twinkies. Because the V is actually trying to feed a psychic thing. It's a concept of reality. So V wants to drink in a good, tasty reality. If it doesn't get that, it will keep looking for it. It'll try and find it. If you don't get that equation right, if you don't attach V obviously with some sort of objective discernment to help get its way, some sort of subjective discernment so it has some sort of way of sorting these things in a better way, then there can just be a grabbing, eating of everything, and then hungry 2 seconds later. So that is kind of lame, and so with your V, you don't want to do that. You want to actually make sure you are going after good stuff that feeds you well. In which case, it's acquisitive. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with going out there and trying to get the best, visceral, sensual, aesthetic experiences that you can, because the most beautiful things are going to be those that are also perfection, harmony. So when you take V to its higher level, see, V can almost sound like it's a power a bit removed from the others. System dynamics and perfection and harmony and the unknown. These sound all kind of like cool, like magic powers, and you have reality. And you don't lose sight of the fact that it is actually a psychic power. It is actually not itself reality. It's there to interpret and drink in the reality. Primitive. If V does not actually have maturity, it's not attached to other powers, it is kept isolated, which can happen because when you think about other powers, a lot of them seem like they're made up, but they're not, as we mentioned. But V doesn't, so a lot of people can take it to where like V is its own thing. Eating and going to the bathroom and sleeping, that's actually like real life, and the other stuff is stuff that happens in your head. Well, first of all, no, all 8 powers happen out here, but all 8 powers also happen in here. There's a concept of what's happening out here that's happening in the V, and if that's not satisfied, it'll be ever hungry. If it's ever hungry, it'll be gluttonous, and if it's ever gluttonous, it won't be able to get what it wants, which means it's going to keep grabbing for stuff. When you grab for stuff, fumble for stuff, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry, it seems kind of primitive. That's all animals get very primitive when they are hungry. So V, if it is not fed, can just get to where it grabs and feeds on whatever is nearby. That's seen as rather primitive. So if it proactively goes after the better feeds, then it feeds much, much, much better. The system stays cleaner and it goes longer. So it can actually, ooh, that nice sunset. A nice sunset can last you hours, weeks, whatever, you know what I mean? So it's very important for V to do that. If so, it will be properly amped all the time, and not in a, I need food, man. I mean, that's bad amped. Okay, so there's good and bad amp. The good amp is simply alert that there's possibility for sensory things to feed you out there, and you're gonna go get them. You're gonna go get the thing that you were meant to get. Foods that are healthy for you, environmental experiences that are healthy for you. Even if they're like stuff like, you know, doing the Swedish thing, you know, and get all hot in the water and then get out and roll around the snow. If that works for you, if that's actually making an experience that feels for the V is a peak experience, that's good because it will feed the V. For example, if that is very rewarding, then you may not need to get other sensory experiences that are not as healthy, because that feels like, wow, I really drank life in. V, although it is 5 senses, is the concept of reality, and it wants to drink reality in. If it doesn't feel it has done that, or it is not doing that, it will be in a state of perpetual hunger. But if it is doing that, it will be in a perpetual state of, tasty, I want more, and I want to share. V has a very, like me, is very sharing, because it has such an excess of energy that it wants to, ooh, this was sensual, taste. And that's really cool, and that's very likable, and that gets everyone else amped up, because this was just an ordinary day, now it's a special day, it's an up day.